All right. So hi, everybody. I'm Wendy Murdoch. I've been hosting these webinars with my friends, basically. It's been a great way to catch up with all my friends. Today, my guest is Patrick King. I have known Patrick since, we never came up with an actual year, did we, Patrick?
No, we didn't. I'm going to have to look that up.
But you were in your either, I think just your early 20s, like just.
Yeah, would have been very early. Yeah.
So now I've known you half your life?
Yeah, darn near. Wow. Yeah, we already established last time this is like my longest standing relationship here. So
all right. So Patrick, I'm just going to let you introduce yourself to people who might not know you. I'm just going to put the spotlight on here. There you go.
Oh, gosh, look at that. I didn't know we could do that with the program.
Yep. You just go to Spotlight Video. See, you're going to learn something every day.
Cool, right? Yeah, well, you're helping me out with all this techie stuff too. Yeah. So but yeah, so hey gang, I'm Patrick King. I'm a traveling clinician, not really traveling right now, which is what's making it possible for us to do these broadcasts and all the podcasts that have been going around lately. I have a focus on biomechanics of the horse, in primarily dressage is my focus, a lot of in-hand work, but I've got a background in Western horsemanship as well. So I've got students that come from kind of all over the map. As far as disciplines go, and with the traveling that I do, a geographic map too. I spend about 350 days of the year, typically, on the road traveling and teaching. So this is kind of a nice chance to sit at home, and and get caught up with Wendy. This is really cool. It's been a long time since we've had this much time to chat.
Yeah. So when I met Patrick, he was pretty much wearing a cowboy hat and chaps and spurs. And so the evolution, when did that start, Patrick? When did you start getting more involved with breeches?
Well, so I grew up actually riding hunt seat. And I showed hunt seat and Western as I was growing up, and did the halter classes and stuff like that. Grew up with Arabs and quarter horses and paint horses and all of that. But I used to tell everybody that I was dressage by passion, but Western by function, with what I had going on and all the colts that I was starting and that sort of stuff. And to begin with, a large portion of the clients that I had were young horses, problem horses, trail horses that had issues, that sort of thing, some roping horses, that sort of stuff. So that's kind of, where that went. And just as time went on, I began getting a larger and larger number of dressage students, English students. And so it just made more sense, riding with jeans kind of tears up the inside of your legs when you're riding in a dressage saddle. So, so switching to breeches was never a big deal for me. It was never a problem. It was something I've always been comfortable with. I think I started showing hunt seat when I was, I don't know, maybe 12 years old or something like that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It was pretty early on. Yeah, pretty early on. Yeah.
Yeah, because when I met you, you were very much into the horsemanship. I think you'd studied with Ray.
Yep.
Who else did you work with?
Well, Ray was a big one. I got the opportunity to live with Ray for a couple months as kind of an apprenticeship program sort of deal, but worked with a lot of folks. Richard Winters is a good friend. I worked with him in the beginning there, worked with guys like Craig Johnson. Trying to think, Tom Curtin was a great one. Got a chance to ride with Buck Brannaman when I was with Ray, kind of as a side-by-side student of Ray at that point. So kind of touched base and got to catch up with a lot of the popular Western clinicians and trainers at that point. Yeah.
So when did it start to evolve more into the dressage?
Well, I'd always had an interest in it, and I guess if I were to try to pin down when that changed, man, I don't even know. I couldn't even tell you.
Yeah, because I saw you at the Pennsylvania Horse Expo near Washington, Pennsylvania, and I went there twice, and you were Western, very clearly Western. But then what I remembered next was seeing you with a Gerogia pole.
Ah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That is so much fun. That was actually, I haven't really thought about when I started with the Gerogia for quite a while, but a friend of mine that I don't think he was into horses even yet, whenever you were presenting at that expo, but he came out and he wanted to learn how to start colts with me and stuff like that. And he was a super handy fellow, super athletic. So it was really easy for him to learn to ride and learn how to start colts because he could handle himself really well as far as athletically. But we were out on a trail ride once on these young horses that I think had 2 or maybe 3 rides on them. And he said, hey, I saw this video on YouTube with this guy and this stick. Let's see what we can do. And he grabbed I'm not even joking. He grabbed a branch as he was riding under a tree and tore this dead branch out of the tree. You can imagine what happened at that point. But that's kind of the start of riding with the Gerogia. That was what really just started getting me interested in it. I'm like, that's kind of cool. And so then I looked into it and, was really impressed with it. And its correlation to a lot of the work that we do, even with our dressage horses, and the history of it, the predating roping and things like that. So that's super fun. I love working.
So do you remember what year that was?
Oh, hell no.
We'll never get a date on this thing. Yeah, because I remember seeing you
I'm terrible at that.
with, pictures of you with a Gerogia pole. And then I think you actually, did you go to the Horse Expo in Pennsylvania?
I did. I did. Yeah, I did. I was part of their daily entertainment deal with the Gerogia. Yeah, with some friends of mine had a stallion that I play. I think when I gave that presentation, I think maybe I had practiced with him or ridden him maybe a dozen or so times before we did that presentation. So that was super fun. But he was a rock star. He's got a lot of reining training and that sort of thing. So he knows how to.
It was a paint horse, wasn't it?
It was a paint horse. Yeah. Yep. But
yeah, because so I remember that. I remember seeing a picture of you, with the Gerogia pole and doing those demos. And then we kind of lost touch with each other for a while. Going our separate ways as people are wont to do. And then I can't remember when, but was it Heidi? Heather. Who was the woman that with the black hair that's from Pennsylvania that we both know? She organized a clinic. I came up. Holly Samuel. Holly. Yeah.
Goodness, I'm a Heidi, Heather. Who? Oh man.
It was an H name. I'm struggling.
It was an H name. I'll give you major credit for that.
Yeah. So I came up and did a clinic, and you rode, and I think that's when I started to see you in breeches. I think that's when.
Okay. Yep. In fact, that was a clinic I think that was hosted at. There was one that you did at the fairgrounds out there, and then I believe it was the next year we coordinated. You did a clinic out at my training facility.
Yeah, but this is later on. This was after those. Those were when I first met you, and then later on, after the Gerogia and kind of being part, Holly had me come up, and it was. I remember the indoor. I can remember it so clearly. But that's when I started to realize that you were really starting to explore other directions and more into the classical. And so who are some of your mentors there or people that you really were starting to follow at that point?
So I was kind of funny story. The first book that I was given on horses whenever I was a kid, I think I was maybe 10, 11. I had an aunt from New Jersey that gave me a book that was Charles de Cunfey's book. I think it was Training Strategies for the Dressage Rider or something like that. And I remember trying to read it, and I didn't understand a damn thing that he was writing about. And so I put it on the shelf, and I've since read it several times and, red penned in it and made notes for myself and things like that. But so Charles was a pretty big influence. I was presenting at an expo. I had just broken my leg, actually. Yeah. And I was doing a colt starting deal at an expo in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. And that was, never mind. I don't even know what year that was. But I got the opportunity to work at that point with Mark Russell. He was also teaching at that. And, just who he was really got me interested in what he had to say. He could have been talking about anything. He's just such a kind-hearted, soft-spoken fellow that we struck a really good friendship, and he really started me down this kind of deeper path because I'd been riding with some dressage instructors locally, and really what happened was I was working some young horses and some problem horses that were going to go on to be dressage horses, and students said, hey, you know, I don't feel comfortable riding my horse in this clinic. Will you ride my horse in this clinic? So I got a chance to ride with Mary Flood a couple times. I believe she's down near you.
Very recently.
Yeah, really cool gal. And, you know, to start out with, I didn't really understand most of what she was saying either, you know, but I've since obviously grown to understand a lot more of those things. But yeah, so that kind of got me on the path, and Mark really got me sinking deep. Mark was a student of Nuno Oliveira, and he was all about the mechanics, and he was really one of the first ones that I recognized talking about, 'cause I'm sure it was spoken about and it just went over my head, recognized talking about the TMJ and the hyoid and the occipital pole and things like that. It was a huge focus for Mark in releasing the tension there, and it really got me on a deeper path. Yeah.
Cool. So, and I know you've ridden with Bettina.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yep. And so when did you start like getting curious about going over to Europe?
Well, you know, I'd done the expos for a few years, kind of did that scene presenting at the expos, and that was a lot of fun. You know, I really enjoy helping large quantities of people at a time, you know, kind of touching and sharing information that way. And, you know, what it came down to, a lot of it was the expense of doing those expos, because of taking time off, not teaching clinics, and because of all the product that you have to have, and, you know, things like that, everything that it takes to be at the expos. You know, even successful expos, you can kind of come out in the negative, right?
Yeah, no, you know, I don't think people realize just how hard expos are. I mean, they're great because you get to see a lot of people and people get exposed to your ideas, but I'll tell you, they are really exhausting.
They're exhausting, and they're expensive, you know, because if you're not, for the times, and you know this, for the times that you're not in the booth, you've got to have somebody in the booth for you, right? So now you're potentially paying for someone else's hotel room, you're paying fees for them to be there for the day. And I'm certainly not complaining. I love the expos, I really love doing them, but it can be a pretty big expense. And my business partner, Dee Dee, we were kind of figuring out the math and figuring things out. She said, you know, the cost that we spend, or the amount that we spend doing these expos, we could go to Europe and you could get some high level instruction and break even. You know, we could end up not costing more to go do that. And I'm kind of a princess. I hate cold weather, says the guy who now lives in Wisconsin. But she said, and you can get the hell out of the cold weather in the winter and go where it's warmer. So I said, sign me up. And that was really when that started. That was about 4 years ago now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you've been to Portugal 4 times?
Is Portugal, so I guess 3 years ago. So Portugal 3 times, 3 years in a row, and now Spain as well.
Right. Yep. And so I joined Patrick, not this year, but last year. A friend of mine was going with Patrick, and I knew I could room with her, and they would be okay because I snore. And we've roomed together before, and she's totally okay with me. And so when I found out,
that works out perfect. You snore, and she's deaf, so that works out.
Yeah, no, she's not. But anyway, I thought, well, you know, I haven't had a vacation in a really long time. Let's do a vacation. Where should we go on vacation? Of course, to ride horses.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I know. It's like crazy horse people. So I joined you last year in Portugal, and that actually was a lot of fun.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
a lot of fun. That was super cool. And that was, you know, one of the things that I look back on, that is that's the most time you and I have spent together also in one place, and not been running around trying to teach, or, you know, having 1,000 things going on. You were still busy, you know, with a lot of your emails and stuff like that, of course, because we've all got to still keep up with that. But
yeah, I don't have to be at home handling all my paperwork.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was super great to be able to spend that time with you and not be, you know, business on necessarily. Yeah.
No, so bottom line is Patrick and I have known each other probably about 20 something years. I don't know how old you are anymore, so I'm just guessing.
Me neither.
It's okay, it's fine. And So when I started Surefoot, that was back in 2012. I think I reached out to you and just, I can't remember. Did I reach out to you, or you just kind of heard it on the grapevine that I was messing around?
I think if I remember it right, we were at a sushi restaurant in Maryland.
Oh yeah, because we were at the Maryland Horse Expo.
At Maryland Horse Expo, yeah. And you were like just at the discovery side of this Surefoot stuff. You were like, check out these videos. This is, it was super brand new, super brand new. And you said, check out these videos, and we're not really sure what this means yet, but you've got to check this out. Yeah. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that was at that restaurant.
Yeah, no, that makes sense actually. Because I remember we met up for sushi at that before that expo started. And Brad and Amy were both there. And
yeah, right.
That was probably 2013 or 14, 13 or 14.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
And you're going to tell them what you thought?
I think you'd love to hear this actually.
Webinar here.
Yeah, right, for the whole world to hear. So I thought it was bullshit, to be completely honest. And Wendy knows this because I've told her this. This is not her first chance hearing this. I thought it was total BS. You see so many, hate to say it, oh look, she ran away. There we go.
This is the captain of the ship.
That's perfect. You see so many gimmicks in the horse industry and so many fads and things like that. But yeah, so when I saw that, I thought that's gotta be crap. That can't be anything. And I thought, the only person that I know that thinks that much and can judge things that much as I do is Wendy. And so I thought, if Wendy says there's something to this, I guess there might be something to this. So we'll have to check it out. And yeah, and that was kind of the start of that. And I've been super interested in it ever since.
Yeah. So, that what you're saying there, Patrick, and one of the reasons I wanted you to tell people that is, in the beginning, that's what most people thought. I mean, I would literally put something on Facebook and people would make comments like, it's BS, it's crap, it's, another snake oil, you're going to guarantee my results, blah, blah, blah. And there was all these people, but that's the thing is, when you come up with a new idea, you have to be ready for people to attack it, because it challenges the norm. It challenges our belief systems. And I was, as being a Feldenkrais practitioner, and by the way, we're going to do a webinar on Feldenkrais here next week.
Awesome.
So that people get a better understanding of Feldenkrais. But as a Feldenkrais practitioner, I'm always asking questions and I'm always looking for new possibilities. So when I discovered this, I was, able to just absorb it because of my years and years of experience with Feldenkrais. But the number of people that, thought I was crazy, thought it was, I was at Equine Affair in Massachusetts, and I had another very well-known bodywork clinician, and I showed him some videos, and he told me not to quit my day job.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
Of course, my day, I don't know that he knew what my day job was, but, I pointed it out to him, and, but that's the kind of thing is, when you discover something new, I don't know, did you ever watch Lenny Bruce? Did you ever hear Lenny Bruce? Lenny Bruce was a stand-up comic, and actually, if you watch Mrs. Maisel on Amazon Prime, she interacts with Lenny Bruce. And when I was a kid, I was 16, I watched one of his movies in the theater, and it's always stuck with me. And the stages of acceptance, and it's anger, denial, fear, rejection, acceptance. Anger, denial, fear, rejection, acceptance. Okay. And so, I had people that were angry with me. I had people that, said this was BS. I had people, just ignore me. I mean, I had all these people reacting in all of these emotions of anger, denial, fear, rejection, acceptance, fear of the unknown. They didn't know what it was. I can't explain it. But, after 8 years now, it's great because we've finally gotten to the point where even if we don't understand exactly how it's working, people are accepting the fact that it actually does work. And what I'm really excited about is that the veterinary world is now embracing Surefoot, which is just huge, because that means it's going to reach and help so many more horses.
Right, for sure.
That really is the point for me, is that it's a tool that anyone can use to help their horse. And so, it's been a passion, but it's also been I feel like I'm an ambassador for this thing, and it's not really mine as much as I'm carrying that torch, and I have to keep carrying it forward because of what happens with the horses.
Absolutely. Well, and there's no denying that it's doing something, right? It's positively influencing them, and there's no denying that. Even if we aren't 100% sure, what it is that it's doing. I know it's hard for me to explain it to people what's going on sometimes.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, right. And so that's a relief for me to hear that.
How's it working? I don't know. But in the beginning, you got a pair of firm pads. I remember that you just got a pair of firm pads and you started experimenting. You sent me some pictures and things. So I'd love you to just talk about like your beginning with the process and how that worked for you, because like so many people, I'm so in the weeds with this thing all the time because I'm living it. But someone like you, coming at it from a very different direction, that'd be great if you could just talk about that.
Sure, absolutely. So I got a pair of pads to experiment with, those firm pads. And I think it was right about the time when you first started color coding them and that sort of thing. So I got the firm pads, the green ones, and it was at that point, I believe I was still playing around with I was still doing the expos, still doing kind of the winter stuff, and I had taken in some horses for training actually for the winter. So this was 6 years ago, maybe, I think 5 years ago. But I had taken in some horses for training, and one of them was super just tight all over in his body. So I thought, what the hell, if Wendy says there's something to this, let's see what happens. And so I invested in the firm pads, and I put them underneath this horse, and he was pretty bothered by them to start with. So we had a whole session on just getting him used to it, stuff like that. And then I just started using them with every horse that was in training. While they were being groomed, I'd have them stand on them. And I started to notice that, they were definitely more accepting of them as they experienced them. Even after the first session, they got really handy with them. Bodies started unlocking. They started really relaxing and letting down for their grooming sessions. And the rides were starting to feel better, which, I'll say it could be because they were, having sessions, and it could be because of the Surefoot pads. So I'm like, well, okay, I'm still kind of on the fence, right? But their bodies started feeling softer and softer, and noticing that they were starting to soften as soon as they would come onto the pads. As soon as they'd stand on them, they'd start to soften. And two of the horses, I want to say I had 6 or 7 horses in training at the time for this little deal. And 2 of those horses would stand on the pads under their front feet for 5 minutes or so while they were being groomed, and they would actually push them back and then step up themselves under their hind feet. And that just blew me away. And they would go and do the rocking and the moving and the swaying and the yawning and releasing and all of that stuff. That was when I really started to think, there's got to be something to this stuff. If the horses started to figure out where they needed those pads to be and actually actively put them where they needed them, I was kind of blown away. I was sold at that point. Yeah.
And I remember there was it a gray horse? You sent me pictures of a horse in a wash stall. And I think it was a gray horse. It was during that time. I remember very clearly it was during that time.
Okay.
But I don't, it was a gray horse.
I'm trying to think. I remember sending you pictures of a black horse in a wash stall.
Oh, maybe it was that. Maybe it was a black horse.
Yeah, I think I've sent you several pictures actually of different horses, because I'll find something doing something that's unique, and I'm like, oh, Wendy, hey, check this out. Has this happened before? What do I do now? But I remember one particular black horse, because I would then, you know, drag the pads along with me to the clinics I was teaching and stuff like that. But I had this one black mare that I was working with, put her on the pads, and she just about instantly fell asleep. And then she woke up. I think this might be the horse you're talking about. She kind of woke up, came out of it, looked down at what she was standing on, and blew her top. She jumped straight up in the air like a Halloween cat, snorting and spinning. And then as soon as her feet hit the ground, she immediately went and stood back on the pads. It was super interesting. There was no asking her to do it. She immediately went back and stood on the pads. So, so again, what was going on? I don't know. Was it valuable to the horse? Absolutely. And she knew it, you know?
Yeah. And that's, you know, I always try to tell people that, you know, even though, you know, the horses seem, most horses in the bell curve are really happy to stand on the pads. You always have to keep your eye out for the outliers, the ones like that horse, or horses that when they step on it for the first time are really, really upset about it because it's different. But that's really interesting that she'd been on it and totally chilled. And then I've seen some horses where they kind of like wake up, like they've been asleep or in a really deep state. And then they're like totally surprised. But yeah, that's a little bit extreme.
Yeah, right, right.
Yeah. So I'm scrolling back, just so you know, I'm scrolling back through our previous messages.
Uh-oh. There's been quite a few.
Yeah, I know, I'm on Facebook. I'm back to 2018. I'm going to go back a little more because I'm going to see if there's a picture of that horse.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. And that's actually, if that's the horse we were thinking of, that barn is the same barn that Felicitas teaches at, where she's been starting to experiment with a lot of the stacking of the pads.
Yeah, Felicitas is going to be my guest tomorrow night.
Oh, sweet. That's awesome.
Really excited about that because she's been using the pads for a solid 2 years now. And she put up pictures of stacking on Facebook, and I had to drive up to her place and find out what was going on because it was so different and wasn't what I was doing with them. You know, I would maybe stack one other pad, but she was, she's the queen of stacking, I have to say.
Right?
Yeah,
for sure.
But, you know, she's just been a huge fan, and the results that she's having are amazing. So I'm so excited to have her tomorrow night as my guest.
That's awesome.
Let's see, I'm still scrolling back here. I'm back to 2017. I found some other pictures of Surefoot, but while I'm looking, somebody asked you where you learned your in-hand work.
Oh gosh, where did I learn my in-hand work? Well, so a lot of it I would say came from Mark Russell. There was a huge influence from him with the in-hand work. Let's see, I did learn, I had some work with Bettina Drummond, learned some in-hand there. She got really deeper, more specific. And I've incorporated also a lot of the work that I've learned in Portugal from the Valensas into the work that I do in hand. So yeah, it's kind of come from a lot of different places, but Mark Russell, I've always done a lot of groundwork. So the in-hand work is kind of, I kind of make a delineation that my groundwork that we do with the horse is kind of our foundation work. And then our in-hand work is like our college level work, kind of is how I would explain that. But yeah, Mark Russell definitely set me on the path to really getting deeper with that.
Oh, and Laura Plunkett is a guest I had on a couple weeks ago. She's going to come back, and she's an animal communicator. And one of the things she told me was that the horses really like to do something on the ground before being ridden. That she consistently finds that they talk about, you know, doing something on the ground. So this is not the horse that you were talking about, but I did find, maybe this will jog your memory. Here's a picture that you sent me of a horse on pads, and clearly he's on slants behind. He started square, but repositioned himself like this. So your comment is that he started out square, but then he repositioned. And, you know, it's not uncommon actually for horses to do that.
Okay.
I don't know if you've noticed that, but it's not uncommon at all for them to start out, to shift the pads around and slide them around and put them in different places and kind of organize them in different ways.
Yeah, and I've always found it very interesting how they may step off of a pad with one foot and slide the other pad with the other foot, you know, kind of taking one with them sort of as they reposition their stance. I've always found that really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I've actually seen horses where they'll have a foot on a pad and they'll keep that foot on the pad and move their whole body around to see what they want to see and not
Yes.
with that foot at all. Like they just
Yes.
kind of take it with them.
Exactly, exactly. And I have one horse in training right now that I've just as experiment stacked him with a firm pad and then the firm slants. And he stands, because I was telling you, I'm just kind of experimenting right now with what do they like, what do they do, where do they go. So he was, I want to say the hard pads and the soft pads on the front and the firm pads and the firm slants on the back. And he'll step off of from the front feet, but he'll keep those hind feet on with the slants. So really interesting.
Yeah, so now that Patrick's home for a while, he went ahead and got the whole set. So how many horses are you playing with right now? How many horses are available?
Right now I have 4 horses in training, but I've got, what do we have now? 10 at the farm that I'm playing with and experimenting with the pads.
Okay. And is there anything consistent that you've seen with all the horses you've been working with?
Anything consistent?
Yeah.
Yeah, they all really like it. I've got one who's pretty interesting. When I'm standing next to him, he really likes the pads. When I step away from him, he jumps off of them. So there's some, but this is a horse that's got a little bit confidence issues, and he kind of needs me as his confidence a little bit. So it's super interesting to see him react to it when I step away. But for the most part, all of them are really, they're gaining some sort of value from the pads, and it's pretty immediate.
So when I was in Australia last October, I was over there training people to use Surefoot, and Robin Shelton Larson gave me some words to help explain why horses step off, and I've added to it a little bit. Because when I got there, she was working on a horse, she does body work, and she had a horse on pads, and he stepped off, and I was like, oh yeah, flies. Because the Australian flies are pretty bad. Right? So the horses, they'll start having flies and they'll kind of go to step or rub their leg or swish at a fly, and suddenly they're stepping off. So I came up with these F's to help explain why horses might step off pads.
Okay.
Flies, fright, food, friends, follow, and finished.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
So, flies, fright, foods, friends, follow, finish. So like that horse that followed you, I always talk about like this invisible umbilical cord. And when the horses are on the pads, you can feel like there's this umbilical cord. And if you move, they're going to come with you. And so I have to sometimes stand there and like wait to feel like the cord stretches a little or softens a little, and then I can step away and they're going to stay.
Yeah.
And that's not uncommon at all. That's actually super common.
Okay.
Yeah, because they start to follow me because they associate me with the comfort, right? I brought them something really nice. And so they're like, you know, when people talk about, you know, getting horses to be with them, what I find is when I start using Surefoot, the horses just want to be with me. I don't have to ask them or do anything. They're just like, you're okay. I want to be with you. Where are you going? Let's go there, right?
Yeah.
And so that trust is so important for me, that they quickly establish trust with the person offering the pads. And have you been seeing that with the training?
I have. Yeah, I've noticed that for sure. And they, it's kind of fun. They seem to look forward to it now. I keep the bag of pads in the arena just so that they're always there, so I can pull them out, whip them out at any point, you know. And a lot of them I'm experimenting, you know, at the beginning of the ride, or before the ride rather, and then at the end of the session, and sometimes in the middle, just to kind of see where they go. But really interesting, if I set anybody loose in the arena, they go over and hang out next to the pads. Yeah.
Very cool. A friend of mine, Catherine Wyckoff, set up a spa day for a therapeutic riding center, and she put out pads and poles, and I think she had a beamer, and she had these different stations, and they turned the horses loose, and the horses got to choose what they wanted. And
cool.
Yeah, there was this whole bunch that went over to the Surefoot pads, and they wanted to stand on Surefoot pads. You know,
that's interesting.
So that doesn't surprise me. And you know, one of the things about having them in the arena that I think is so valuable is that's the place where if you have a horse that has been poorly trained or had kind of aggressive training, they're not so sure they want to go into that space. They're a little bit like, oh, I'm going back into the arena, kind of like, you know, oh, I've got to, you know, go clean my room now, right? That kind of thing.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
when you have the
Negative association.
exactly, but when the pads are there, what I'm seeing with horses over and over again is their association changes, and it's suddenly like, oh, that's a nice place that I want to be because I'm going to stand on these pads, so I'm happy to go there, as opposed to, oh, don't let me, you know.
Yep. Well, and that changing of associative pairing is one reason why most of the time when I'm working with pads, especially at clinics and stuff like that, I'll go to the scary place. I'll go to the scary corner. Once the horse understands the pads, that's where I'm going to go, so they can find that release and relief where the, you know, where the grizzly bears live, basically.
No, exactly. And that's sort of the next phase, I think, of with Surefoot. So the first phase is it's an offer to the horse. They're allowed to choose which pad, how long. But once they start to recognize that the pads are of value or positive for them, then if I have a sticky place, like you say, or somewhere where they get anxious, or somewhere where I want them to let down more, I take the pads there. And I had an Arab once who was like, we were in this huge arena and he was totally like freaked out about this corner. And I just went down there with the pad and I said, you know, comfort, anxiety, comfort, what you pick, which one would you like?
Yep. You make the choice.
And let down, or, you know, and the horses start to learn how to throw, what I call it, throwing the parasympathetic switch. They learn how to let down.
Yeah, kind of that self-regulation.
Exactly. Self-regulation is a great way to think of it. And so like putting them on the pads is kind of like toggling that parasympathetic switch. They'll go up and then you say, up, here's the pad, down, up, down. And pretty soon they're like, oh, I can throw this switch myself.
Yeah,
right?
I know how to go there. Exactly.
Yeah. And then the pads actually become, they don't even have to stand on them. I don't know if you've had any horses get to that stage where just seeing the pads, well, yeah, because they're coming in the arena and they're going over to the pads. Just seeing them starts to elicit all the positive changes that we see, all the letting down, the relaxation, the breathing, the licking and chewing, just by seeing the pads.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's really cool to see, for me, watching the decision-making process, watching the learning process with the horses is fascinating, you know, so seeing what they go through with these is super cool to me.
Yeah, so somebody's asked a question of, have you experimented with the firm pads, the green ones, and which ones do you lean toward more frequently with this range of horses?
Oh, that's a really cool question. You know, I'm still so much on exploratory mode, but I'm finding with the horses that I'm working with anyway, I'm finding myself doing a lot with the medium pads. Those are the purple ones, right? The medium pads. Yeah, I find myself doing a lot with the medium pads. Even when I'm stacking, I'm doing a lot of firm and medium. That's just my go-to for now, you know?
Yeah, and what I find is, I find that it changes a lot. Like I'll be totally into one density for a while. And I think horses do this too. I've been totally into one. And then like I'll pull out the hard pad again and I'll see like, wow, that's like really crazy. And I'll start working with that. And it's always good when you're stacking, putting the hard pad on the bottom. Think of it as a base pad because it is harder. It's a great pad to put on the bottom of any stack. I, you know, like I'll go through these like flavor of the month, color of the month pad. And then, you know, like I'll fall in love with that physio pad and then it'll be the soft pad or the firm slants. It's kind of funny, but I think the horses actually do the same thing in that they'll get really curious about a particular density for a while and then they'll be really curious about something else.
Yeah, and that's what I've had a lot of fun with, just the experimentation right now with all these different horses is, you know, we're just dumping the whole bag out onto the arena floor and saying, okay, let's see what they do with this one, and what about this density under this foot and this density under this other foot, and you know, what if we stack 6? No, we don't do 6, but I did have a mare that's out here at the barn that I had her on 3 pads under the front feet. Just to see where she would go, you know, just to get some changes in the body. She's really stoic about it. She doesn't do a whole lot. You can see a little bit of tiny movements, but big difference after she comes off the pads.
Yeah. And so just for people to know that you always start with one pad in the beginning, and over time you start to do stacking. It's not something you jump into straight away, because the horses need to understand what's going on and be willing to stand on these unstable surfaces and be uneven for a while as you build things up. But again, like tomorrow when we talk to Felicitas, I'm sure we'll have pictures of stacking and talk about how you get there. Somebody else has asked me about, do I have stories about equine rescues using pads? And we do have equine rescues using pads. Most of us get too busy to kind of give me reports back, but when I run into people, I'll ask them. And the pads have been really, really helpful, because these horses at rescues, a lot of times they've either been traumatized, or they're older, or they have arthritis. And also your therapeutic riding horses who have such a tough job, they really do, that using the pads can really bring them comfort. And I have one story with a thoroughbred off the track who, when I walked into the barn, the woman said, oh, I looked at this gray horse. I said, I want to work with this gray horse. And she said, no, you don't. He's a butthead. And so I insisted, and I had to really insist for her to bring this gray horse out. And I only had a half physio pad. And when I put that underneath his foot and it was his right front because I was standing on the right side, put his foot down, in 10 seconds, all of the behavior stopped. All of the fussing and messing around completely stopped. And so I keep trying to point out to people that so much of this behavior, in my opinion, after doing this for 8 years, is really a balance problem, whether that's mentally, emotionally, or physically. And when we rebalance the horse using the Surefoot pads, then they can rebalance in mental, emotional, and physical ways. And that's what I keep saying. But we have to be willing to allow them to be different. And sadly, the trainer at that location continued to think of the horse as a butthead and refused to use the pads. And so he got locked right back into his patterns because the people weren't willing to let him be different. And so it's so important for us to be really present in the observation and recognize that these horses with adverse behaviors that we label like crazy, really, they're just horses that are looking for help, and they're not feeling safe. And Vegas, and go back and look at my lectures on Vegas that I have with Violet Van Hees. But, Vegas' big question is, am I safe? And if you don't feel safe, then you're going to have all kinds of behaviors because you're not feeling safe.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And they don't have other ways to express those things.
Right.
The body tension, like you said, the physical, the mental, the emotional. They don't have other ways. It's not like they're going to send you a text message, So what they have is their behavior. If we only
try to correct the behavior but not solve the underlying balance problem, it's just a Band-Aid on a giant hole. But the minute we solve that balance problem, like this horse, he just totally stopped all his messing around, stood there quietly, totally let his neck down, and was really, really quite happy to be a good citizen at that point, So somebody just asked a question: when you're riding your quiet horse, when would you experiment with the pads? So do you have any quiet horses that you've been working with?
Do I have quiet horses? Yeah, I've got some quiet horses that I'm working with as well. And honestly, right now, I'm experimenting with the pads as much for me as for the horses. So every horse is standing on the pads almost every day, just in an experimental stage. Yeah, so quiet horse, hot horse, all of them, we're just experimenting. Yeah.
And so the thing is with your quiet horses that it's being able to offer them a way to ground and to let go of tension. One of the things that we see is fascial release. I mean, and I have photographs of a horse where the horse was on the pads and we saw the fascia get into these really interesting wrinkles. And I just had, I did another webinar for the Fans of Surefoot. If you are more interested, please join Fans of Surefoot group on Facebook. But she was telling me how she was putting pads underneath the horse's right front foot. And when the osteopath came to release the gelding scar, that it referred to that right front leg. And so the pads were already starting to help change the fascia that he was working on working on the gelding scar. So, you know, this stuff is all connected, and we can't get away from the fact that it's all connected. But some ways are easier in than others, and some are simpler. And that's one of the things about Surefoot pads, is that anybody that knows how to pick up a foot can use Surefoot with their horse.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. That's a real easy door in. Yeah.
Yep. So somebody's asking, I bought pads, but they haven't received them yet. We just got some pads in, but I'm still waiting on mediums. They should be here next week. And I'm wondering if I should use pads before or during shots. Okay. So if you're going to use the pads to help your horse deal with things like shots or shoeing or anything, what you'd like to do is work with the horse quietly before any of those situations arise. In other words, in a quiet environment, just start with your pads, make sure you're in a nice big space, there's not a lot of activity around, so that you can see how he responds to the pads just by themselves. And doing that repeatedly over in the next few days or maybe a week, so that the horse is already starting to let down. And then when the veterinarian comes or someone comes to have to do any treatment, I would be using the pads before they arrive and then when they get there, so that you keep helping the horse figure out how to throw that parasympathetic switch and calm and rest.
That makes sense. You're setting the stage then at that point.
Exactly. And, you know, like anything, you don't really want to start it when you're already hyped up. I mean, I worked with horses that are hyped up because they came in and I'm supposed to teach a riding lesson and I can't get near the horse.
Right. And so that's what you're dealing with. Yeah.
Right. But really the idea is here is to have an environment where the horse can start to be self-introspective and feel the changes and the chemical changes. So later this week, I have Dr. Stephen Peters, who co-wrote Evidence-Based Horsemanship. And we've done one lecture with him, Brain 101. That's on my Surefoot Equine YouTube channel. And he's coming back for another dose of equine brain. And Stephen is awesome because he can explain to us what's happening in the neurochemical makeup of a horse when he's in high anxiety and when he's relaxed. And so it's just another piece of, you know, all these webinars are trying to kind of take all these different people and help us kind of shape and form an image of what this is doing and how it's working.
That's really cool.
With shoeing and trimming, we have a lot of farriers and barefoot trimmers now using Surefoot, because if the horse is uncomfortable, everyone is unsafe. The horse, the handler, and the farrier or trimmer. And so by using Surefoot pads, we have stories of, you know, my horse had to be tranquilized for the farrier, and now I did Surefoot twice and I don't have to tranquilize him anymore. So
fantastic.
Isn't that fabulous? Those are one of my favorite stories. I get those a lot.
That's awesome. Good.
Yeah. So anywhere you know, even if your horse is calm, this is going to make a difference. I should see if I can get Larry Weitzel on. Larry Weitzel, do you know Larry? Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
Larry got some pads and then he sent me an email, and I haven't forgotten it because I thought it was really powerful. He said that the horses that really need Surefoot want it, and that the horses that are not in need of it so much are less interested. And I think I agree with him, because my horse, he's got huge feet and big frogs, and he's always been really nimble and known where his body is. He's like, oh, mom's doing this again. Okay, well.
He's tolerant. Yeah,
you know, he'll humor me. And sometimes he likes it more than others. But like the other day, he was like, no, I'm not really interested. Thank you very much. And that's okay. So someone's asked, Patrick, how has Surefoot informed your training of your horses? I'm not sure I totally get that question. Or maybe another way to say it is, what information has Surefoot given you about the horses you have in training?
Well, you know, what I found, because the horses that I have in training right now, a lot of them, the specific things that we're working on is better balance, more using the haunches, doing a lot of lateral work, that sort of thing. So it's been great to see when I've been using their bodies in a better way. It's just like going to the gym, right? You know, so we hear people say sometimes, I want to work my horse. Oh man, he must have worked his horse too hard, he's sore. Well, I've never known anybody go to the gym and say, I want to get stronger, but I don't want to be sore, right? I don't want to feel any kind of tension that way. I found it kind of tells me, hey, I'm working the right muscles. When they want to stay a little longer with back feet, on those pads and they want to do a little more rocking and yawning and releasing, that to me is saying, hey, we're getting into some muscles. We're starting to engage their core in a way that is going to be beneficial to them. So hopefully that's kind of going along the lines of what they're talking about in the question here. It's, I would say, in a big way, kind of validated the training that I'm doing, because the horses are saying, hey, I want to hang out here a little bit more. And I've found that, you know, they're more ready to use their haunches in this way that we're talking about after they've been on the pads.
Yeah, so I had a hunter barn that totally stopped lunging the horses and only used the surefoot pads.
Oh, cool. Wow. Wow.
Yeah. You know, so as a warm-up, surefoot can be really, really useful, because
Yeah.
you know, when you're standing on pads and you're swaying, swaying is working those little tiny postural muscles, right?
Absolutely.
And they find that when you move the little muscles, and this is another reason why Feldenkrais is so powerful, that's actually really demanding to work the little tiny postural muscles. So
Yeah.
you know, sometimes I tell people you got to be careful how long you leave your horse on the pads, because when they're doing that swing, they are working muscles and possibly in a new way that they haven't done before. And you can make them sore, just like you starting a new exercise program. Just think of standing on a Bosu for an hour, how you would feel.
Exactly.
You know,
Right.
you want to
Right.
dose it and be a wise parent is what I think of is, you know, even if the horse is really enjoying himself, to walk him off the pads because you've just watched him sway for a couple of minutes. And you can always do it again, but you can't undo it if you make them sore, and they can't understand what's happened.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Absolutely. Cool.
So, so we've only got a few more minutes, Patrick. So I don't have the list of questions like what you do with other people. I haven't been doing that.
Whew, thank goodness.
Yeah, so we don't have to worry about that kind of stressor. But you know, so, but I will ask you this. Now that you've been in isolation, if you will, and you've been experimenting, what kind of things, what's come up for you? Like,
What's come up for me?
yeah, like this is a totally different lifestyle for you to be parked in one place and working with
This is a totally different lifestyle. You're absolutely right. You know, well, it's been super interesting for me because, you know, I'm here with my fiance, Lisa, and we've been chatting a little bit about potentially changing my schedule in the coming years. I wasn't planning on doing it this year, but we've been talking about me maybe staying home, taking in outside training horses, and then hitting the road for a couple months and teaching, and then coming back for a couple months and sort of swapping back and forth kind of seasonally to spend more time at home. And this has kind of forced us to do a trial run on that. So it has definitely changed things for me, but you know, what I found is I can sit still. It's been really interesting. That's been in years past, and I think anybody who knows me knows this. If I'm in one place for more than 2 or 3 days, I start to get kind of itchy, you know. I've got to get moving, just because that's how my life has been, right? 2 or 3 days in a hotel, and then I go on to the next hotel for maybe a day, up to 3, 4 days maximum. My time in Portugal and Spain, the first year that I was there, was the longest I'd been anywhere in one town that length of time for 20 years, which is a lot, you know. That's a long time. So I joke that that's my second home over there, because it's the place I sit still the longest. But now the time here, I think I've exceeded that. And it's been fantastic, actually. I'm loving it. The to-do list keeps growing, which is cool.
Yes.
It's fine, because I'm checking off a lot of things, you know, but yeah.
called a honey-do list.
The honey, yeah, well, I call it my ta-da list, because if I were to get it all done, it would be magic, right? Ta-da. You know, there's that whole, you know, toilet paper deal. You take that honey-do list and you roll it all up, you've got a massive roll on that, you know?
You know, and so it's interesting because, you know, it's like confronting habits. We get into habits just like horses of moving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly you're asked to stand still.
Yeah.
You know, and when we think about how we ask our horses to do that, but we don't have the, you know, they don't have the understanding of why that's happening. Have you been standing on the pads yourself at all?
I have been standing on the pads a little bit, and you know, you just kind of triggered my mind into something a little bit. It was something that Ray used to say all the time: is you just got to get him more ready. Just got to get him more ready. Talking about the horses for whatever it is we were doing with them, right? And you know, the whole moving around, not sitting still. I guess I finally got to a spot where I'm more ready to sit still. I got more ready. But have I been playing with the pads myself? I have. And it's fun, it's interesting. I get some feedback from my body, my lower back especially. I get some feedback from, and that's pretty cool. And I love standing on the pods, you know.
Oh yeah,
that's like two tiny Bosu balls, you know.
yeah.
That's yeah.
So somebody's asked, have you noticed a difference in using them before or after your rides? And would you use Surefoot after body work like chiropractic massage as well as before? I'm just going to throw in that we have chiropractors and osteopaths that are using Surefoot, and they will use it either before, during, or after the treatment. So that, you know, it's beautiful because it can just blend into different places depending on what you're doing and what the horse feels like and how he responds. So Patrick, have you noticed a difference in using them, whether you use the pads before or after the ride?
Have I noticed a difference before or after? You know, I've noticed a difference when I'm using them before the ride, and that the horses feel a bit more connected to their body when I'm riding, if I've used the pads before. And then I find that it helps them to let down better. And you know, you talk about them being used as a warm-up. I find it really helpful in the cool down as well, you know, kind of letting them just reset and feel themselves again after the ride. Yeah, so to me it's a both, you know.
Yeah, no, that's the thing about them, is that you can combine them with lots of other techniques, and anywhere you want to have your horse feel more relaxed and be more confident and comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
absolutely.
Thank you, Patrick. It's 4 o'clock, so thank you so much for joining us. And finally, I got to interview you.
Right. I'm not usually okay with this, but you know, I like to be on the controlling side of things, not in the hot
This is a bit of a, but see, I'm the captain in charge here, so.
This is true. You are. Aye, Captain.
So thank you so much for joining me, and it's always a pleasure to spend time with you.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much. It's been great to do this, and thanks to everybody for tuning in.
So this and all my webinars can be found on my YouTube channel, Surefoot Equine. Please go to Surefoot Equine page on Facebook and like it. Join fans of Surefoot Equine. And I keep posting up when I'm going to have new guests. And if there's any change in my guest schedule, like I've added Dr. Sherry Johnson for this Friday, but I'm doing these webinars 5 days a week as long as we're here. Virginia's apparently going to be in stay at home until June. So I've already got guests lined up for the next couple of weeks. So please join me with my webinars. Just go to murdochmethod.com and sign up for my newsletter, and you'll be the first to know of who my guests are for the next week, because I put out my email on the weekend. Thank you so much, Patrick, and thank you everyone for joining me. And until next time, please go and enjoy the ride.